Better. Okay. Thanks. So this is the ICANN 60 readout, and our three speakers are going to explain much better than I would what this actually means. So today with us we have Judith Hellerstein, from formerly, as I understand it, from the North American at Large organization. You're still, yeah.
I had been the secretary.
No, I don't think it.
The secretary and vice chair of Naralo, and now I am just still a representative there.
And so what I'm gonna ask you perhaps to start with is to introduce yourselves and explain your positions, because perhaps online a lot of folks joining us know exactly what this all is, but perhaps here in the room and also online some other people don't. So please explain what these soup of acronyms means. It's sometimes hard to figure it out. Then we also have Joe Catapano, Stakeholder Engagement Manager for North America for ICANN. And then Veni Markovsky, who's VP for UN Engagement here in New York.
Is your mic possibly pointed not the right direction?
Which mic should we change?
Just maybe if it's, try it now.
Okay, I tried now.
Yeah, it's a little better. If it's that way, then maybe it's...
I turned this one off and then it stopped.
Oh, it did?
So they may have an echo when they're all on.
Oh, that might be it, yeah. So let's have only one mic working at a time. Okay, so I'm Hugo Zilberberg, and I'm with the Global Digital Futures Initiative here. Okay. I'm with the Global Digital Futures Initiative here at CIPA. This is an initiative focusing on the intersection of tech and policy that's been running for more than 3 years now. And the areas where we do research are one, cybersecurity and cyber conflict with Jay Healy; two, digital economy and digital trade with Dean Jano kind of sponsoring our efforts there; and then internet governance, which is why we're incredibly happy to hold this meeting here tonight. This is also live streamed by the ISOC New York City, so thanks a lot. And it's also live tweeted, so if you want to ask your question, you can use the hashtag TechSocietyCIPA, so you can ask your questions live. And so now perhaps we can start with a little introduction of everybody. Please introduce yourselves, and so we can start that way.
Hi everyone. As Hugo said, I'm Joe Catapano. I'm the manager of stakeholder engagement at ICANN for the North America region, which in the ICANN universe is the US, Canada, and the island territories. I interface with the business, civil society, academic, and technical communities.
Hi, I'm Judith Hellerstein, and I'm with the, I'm here to talk to you. I'm from Naralo. Naralo is one of the constituencies within At Large, and we represent the territories of US, Canada, Puerto Rico, as well as many of the Pacific islands that the US government owns. And so I'll be happy that I have some flyers in the back of the room that explain all about Naralo. Many voices, one internet. We encompass three different languages: French, English, and Spanish. And we are the voice of end users in North America.
And I'm Veni Markovsky. As Hugo was saying, I'm the Vice President for UN Engagement. I'm based in New York, dealing with the relations between ICANN and the United Nations and permanent missions to the United Nations. I'm following the deliberations at the UN General Assembly with regards to cybersecurity, internet governance, cybercrime in first, second, and third committee of the UN General Assembly.
Great. Well, I guess we should get started then. Thank you to Columbia University for hosting us, and thank you to the ISOC Internet Society New York chapter. We try and do these. This is the second time we're doing one of these readout sessions in New York, and hopefully make it a regular thing. So thanks everybody for coming out, and hopefully we'll find this informative and useful. So before we dive into the ins and outs of the ICANN 60 meeting, just for those people that aren't familiar with ICANN, the acronym ICANN stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And we coordinate the Internet's unique identifiers. And so those unique identifiers are domain names, Internet protocol addresses, and protocol parameters. And, okay, sorry about that, thank you. And we were formed in 1998 as a not-for-profit corporation. We are headquartered in California, but we have offices, headquarters in California, and then we have offices around the world in all different regions. So ICANN is, there are sort of three legs to the ICANN stool. There's the ICANN organization, which is the staff members, if you will, of which myself and Venny are members of, and there's about 300 or so ICANN staff members spread across the world at our different offices. We have a board of directors that is elected by the community. And the community, as you'll see here, is the most important part of ICANN, and the people who do the work. And so the ICANN organization is really here to support the community. And the community is all volunteer-based. They come from different sectors: business, civil society, technical, internet engineering community, academic community, and governments. And they work through a bottom-up, consensus-based, there's a bottom-up policy development process to develop a policy that supports the mission. There are three supporting organizations at ICANN that you'll hear about during the presentation. There is the Generic Name Supporting Organization, or GNSO. There is the Country Code Name Supporting Organization, or CCNSO, and there is the Address Supporting Organization, or ASO. There are also 4 advisory committees that advise on ICANN policy. There is the At-Large Advisory Committee, or ALAC. There is the Governmental Advisory Committee, or GAC. The Root Server System Advisory Committee, also called RSAC, and the Security and Stability Advisory Committee, also called SSAC. Apologies for the very busy slide. We'll share the slide with you guys so you can have a closer look at them. This is a look at how the community develops policy at ICANN. So you'll see over in the blue on the left are the different supporting organizations that develop the policy, and then at the bottom are the advisory committees that advise on the policy. So, and just quickly in a nutshell, the issue will be identified, a report will be developed, we'll initiate a policy development process, call for volunteers, draft recommendations, and all of this work goes on mainly through conference calls and email lists and through the web. But the community gets together 3 times a year at ICANN meetings, which ICANN 60 was one, which we'll talk about. So that's the person-to-person interaction. They'll submit a final report to the board. There'll be public comment by the community. Anybody in the world can comment on an ICANN policy. All of the policies are up on our website, and it's free and open. You don't need to have a special membership to comment on policy or anything like that. After the policy recommendations go through, they go to the ICANN board and they vote on the policy. And then after a yes vote, they're implemented. So now a little bit about the ICANN 60 meeting, which was in Abu Dhabi. As I said, we hold 3 meetings a year. And ICANN 60 was the annual general meeting. It was a 7-day meeting focused on outreach, capacity building, and showcasing ICANN's work to a global audience. One of the features of the annual general meeting is that there's a rotation in ICANN's leadership. So we had a new chair and vice chair elected. So Shireen Chalabi is, I'll give you a little bit of just a really high-level background on some of our new board members. Shireen Chalabi is the new ICANN board chair. He has extensive experience in leadership roles in banking and technology and was selected by the nominating committee. Chris Despain is the new vice chair of ICANN. He's the former CEO of the .au domain administration, has a background in corporate law, and he was selected by the CCNSO to the ICANN board in 2011. And we also welcome some new board members. So Sarah Deutsch is one, and she is an attorney and was selected by the nominating committee. Avri Doria, who is very familiar, yes, to the New York ISOC-NY York Chapter, and very active community member. She's a research consultant and was selected by the nominating committee to serve on the board. Leon Sanchez is an intellectual property attorney, and he was elected by the at-large community. Matthew Shears is an internet and telecommunications consultant. He was selected by the GNSO. And I hope I don't butcher the name, Manal Ismail of Egypt. Ismail? Thank you. Is the new GAC liaison to the board and the GAC chair. And she is the executive director of the International Technical Coordination at the National Telecom Regulatory Authority of Egypt. So today's presentation will just do some of the headline developments of the meeting and what transpired. It's not totally encompass every single thing that happened, but hopefully give you a good snapshot of what happened. Here's a look at the meeting by the numbers, as we say. There were over 300 public sessions, more than 1,900 attendees. We had more than 700 newcomers, which is always great to see. And this was the first ICANN meeting in the Gulf region. So now we'll go into a little bit of what happened at the meeting, starting with updates related to the new generic top-level domain program. And here's just a snapshot of what that is. It's an initiative coordinated by ICANN, enabling the largest expansion of the domain name system, and aim to enhance innovation, competition, and consumer choice. Excuse me. Top-level domains are the letters found at the end of an address, so everything to the right of the dot, .com, .net, .org. And generic top-level domains are any top-level domains that don't represent a country or territory. So .us or .uk, for instance, are country code top-level domains. They don't fall into this particular category. There was an application round for new generic top-level domains that closed in April of 2012. We now have more than 1,200 new GTLDs on the internet, and here's a look of how they're dispersed throughout the world, the different regions. So now we'll go into more of what happened at the meeting. So a review team known as the CCTRT is assessing the new generic top-level domain program in the areas of competition, consumer trust, and consumer choice. And the review examines the extent to which the introduction of new GTLDs has promoted those things in the domain name system. And it addresses safeguards put in place to mitigate issues arising from the introduction of new GTLDs and the program's application. The CCTRT invited the community to a discussion on the latest findings and recommendations on domain parking, which is registering or obtaining a domain name that is not associated with a service or activity, domain name system abuse, and rights protections mechanisms. The main findings of the group were that new GTLDs have higher parking rates than legacy GTLDs. The introduction of new GTLDs did not increase the total amount of abuse for all GTLDs. There is more trademark infringement in new GTLDs than in legacy GTLDs, and rights protection mechanisms are generally considered to have been helpful in mitigating the risks anticipated with new GTLDs. And you'll see at the bottom of these slides, there's links to recordings and transcripts of these sessions, the relevant sessions. There's links to audio and video recordings and transcripts of all these sessions. So when we distribute the slides, you'll be able to click on those and learn more. In further news, there was progress in reviewing trademark rights protection. So the GNSO chartered a working group to conduct a policy development process to review all of the rights protection mechanisms developed for the new GTLD program. And the group received a staff report on statistics relating to disputes filed under the new Uniform Rapid Suspension, or URS, dispute resolution procedure, and sought community feedback on experiences with that. And the working group is now collecting data on other rights protection mechanisms. This policy development process is the first to review all of the rights protection mechanisms developed in ICANN's history, and is also conducting a first ever extensive data gathering exercise on the use and efficacy of rights protection mechanisms. And now I will turn it over to Judith, who will talk about the new GTLD auction proceeds.
Hi, yes, it's Judith Hellestein again. So I don't know if people, when ICANN had an auction several years ago for these new GTLDs, which are basically many other ones similar to like Dot Pharmacy or something, or other similar type of things with different other names, much more different than .biz or those type of names, more these commercial names. The auction produced a bonus surplus of money that was more than ICANN needed to cover its cost. And so this amount of money, which is termed the auction proceeds, is there's a cross-community working group that is working to figure out how are we going to use this money. And what we've been looking at first is looking at figuring, there's a six-phase process of first reviewing everything and then coming up with examples, coming up with mechanisms. And what we're discussing, what we have been discussing before is what kind of organizations can gain access to this money. How we're trying to expand, so looking at as the open internet is a very important role, and capacity building on this role is a very important role in this area. Is how are we going to figure out how to expand and better explain ICANN to others, and better help end users or nonprofits understand what can be done. And so we have worked to create a preamble, which is basically an overarching guidance for the application and selection of projects in which auction proceeds funds will go to. And these projects are required to be aligned with the mission and any criteria that is needed to maintain ICANN's nonprofit status. But we're looking at it of how are we going to support projects that are consistent with an open interoperable internet. And what does that term mean? How is it described? Can we describe it from many different angles, whether it's a technological angle, whether it's a business angle, political angle, a social angle, a cultural angle. It has many different meanings and many different communities. And since this cross-community group is has people in all the different communities, from the GAC to the at-large to even other GNSO, to all different communities. So we're all working to figure out how we can make something, how we can create enough capacity building and find applications and training that can go for this. So we are looking at, we've been working for over a year, and we're going to be gearing, right now we're looking at what kind of mechanism, funding mechanism. So should we have it managed by a foundation? Should we have it managed by a hybrid, like people within ICANN and also a foundation to guide us? Should we be ICANN only? Should be, what kind of mechanism? Because we don't foresee, after we spent the money, we plan on closing it down. So the question is, how are we going to make sure the costs are minimal so that we can get most of the money? Question?
Question online, how much?
I think it's 250 million. But it's a large sum of money. We won't know exactly how much money it is until all the challenges to these domains get decided. And once all the challenges of what domains get decided, we're also looking at who can get this pot of money. Is it only restricted to outside of ICANN users? Can ICANN organizations who need some extra money for maybe a fellowship, or right now there's a comment on the budget, on whether the finance and budget can use some of this money for their coffers. Really trying to figure out the rules of the road. Who can get the money, who cannot get the money, and then what kind of a mechanism are we going to be using? How will we find experts to help guide us? And so those are some of the issues that we're going to be working on now. Like all multi-stakeholder efforts, it's a long process. We have meetings once every other week, twice a month, but it's a long process because there's so many different opinions and everyone wants to get involved. And it's hard to hear everyone. It's still, even though we're halfway through, you can always join. The only requirements to joining are that you file a statement of interest. So that way they can know that you're not here to get some of the money yourself. So most people, everyone who's on the call has filed a statement of interest. And so we expect to wrap up some of the process and come out with a report by the Puerto Rico meeting. And so we're coming to an end on this. But I can give you more information, or you can join the working group, which is it's called Cross Community Working Group on Auction Proceeds. We have a meeting Thursday.
Great, thanks. And now we'll move to more of the legal and technical topics that were discussed at the meeting. So Vinny, I think you're going to take us through GDPR.
Yeah, this is one of the less interesting topics for you guys, just kidding. But Greg here is one of the lawyers in the audience who is perhaps the most knowledgeable, so I have to be extra careful as another lawyer, to know what exactly I'm saying. But the GDPR, we are using a lot of abbreviations. So for the people in the audience, if you hear a new abbreviation and you don't know what it means, which probably means every abbreviation, just raise your hands. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. That's a European Union regulation which will start to be enforced next year on May 25th. And it's generally providing the protection of the data of the European citizens. But why we are discussing it at ICANN, and why actually every business that has anything to do with the internet is addressing this issue, is because the European Union is one of the biggest markets on the planet with about 500 million people, I think. And no international company or international organization can ignore the issue. And the issue is how businesses are protecting the...
This one is ringing, so I'm just going to keep this.
Oh, thank you. Jolie is the mastermind behind everything that's happening online here, so thanks, Jolie. Now I can even hear my voice better. So ICANN address has started to address the GDPR and the data protection for quite a while. I mean, almost since the beginning, because one of the services that it provides, which is called WHOIS, and that's or it will be known soon as Registration Directory Service, which is the data that contains every domain name. When you register, when a person registers a domain name, he or she has to put some personal data like an address, phone number, email, and then there has been continuous conversations around ICANN what part of this data should be public, and now with the GDPR this conversation is becoming more and more heated because by May 25th there should be some kind of decision on that problem, or else the registries and registrars, the companies that manage those domain names and maintain the database might be a subject to some pretty high fines, as far as I remember, from the European Union regulations. But these discussions have been going on forever within ICANN, because you have different groups which aim at different goals, and some of the participants at ICANN were saying that this information should be all public because it's good for law enforcement purposes, and others have been saying that it shouldn't be public because it's good for privacy issues and related to privacy questions. So the conversations continues. There is a link on the slide with a couple of links actually, which point to different statements that were passed at the ICANN meeting, and also history. I will just mention a couple of those. First of all, the GAC addressed the issue, the GDPR WHOIS issue. It's in the GAC communique. It's actually one of the issues that is addressed on 3 pages of the GAC communique, so it's pretty substantive amount of the communique is dedicated to data privacy. Mainly the GAC is saying that is saying 2 things, that it's giving an advice to the board on 2 things. First, that they should that ICANN should be keeping WHOIS quickly accessible for security and stability purposes, for consumer protection and law enforcement investigations and crime prevention, and it should keep it also for quickly accessible to the public for legitimate purposes like combat fraud and deceptive conduct, infringement and misuse of intellectual property, etc. At the same time, the GAC is also advising the board to seek outside counsel to provide guidance on the GDPR. This was also mentioned in the statement for contractual compliance. I believe there is a line about it on the slide, which statement says that we know that the GDPR will have an impact on open, publicly available WHOIS, and we have no indication that abandoning existing WHOIS requirement is necessary to comply with the GDPR. But we don't know the extent to which personal domain registration data of residents of the European Union should continue to be publicly available. So it's a lot of uncertainty around this question, and a lot of smart people whose businesses to address those issues are engaged into this. So I urge anyone who is here or online and is interested in that topic to just follow the discussions, because the question is pretty serious. And by the way, it might have an impact not only on ICANN but on any other company that is collecting some kind of personal data in the European Union. So I think we can move to the next. Oh, there is a question.
So if I can ask without this feeding back from Thomas Streins, which I can't, so I'll just turn this off and turn this up. So, which is, why didn't ICANN get involved earlier in the process? Why didn't they lobby before the law came down? like a ton of bricks.
I'll repeat the question so that people can, although they're online, they probably see it in the chat room, but why ICANN was not involved earlier? Well, ICANN, first of all, ICANN is not lobbying for laws. ICANN is not a lobbying organization, as the question was asking. And secondly, it's been involved as soon as, the issues, the discussion on the WHOIS and the data that is in WHOIS has been going back. There is a GAC principles regarding GTOD WHOIS services dated March 28, 2007. So it's been more than 10 years that it has been addressed. It's just that the general data protection regulation is now coming into force, so the debate becomes more and more heated because the deadline is in about 6 months. So next slide.
Okay, great. Thank you. So moving on, we'll take a look at the Security, Stability, and Resiliency Review Team. It's also called the SSR2. And the SSR2 is examining how ICANN is meeting its commitment to enhance operational stability, reliability, resiliency, and security of systems and processes that affect those internet unique identifiers that I mentioned at the top of the program. So on October 28th, the ICANN board sent a letter to the review team to pause their work pending input from supporting organizations and advisory committees at ICANN on a number of aspects of the review. And the review team used their face-to-face meeting on November 3rd to review feedback received from the community during the ICANN meeting in Abu Dhabi. They are currently working with supporting organizations and advisory committee leadership to address the concerns raised by the community, and it is up to the community to decide how best to move forward to resume the review. And now to talk about, we'll talk a little bit about something called the IANA Stewardship Transition and ICANN Accountability. Veni, did you want to?
Sure. That's one of my favorite topics, because I've been involved in a lot of discussions since I joined ICANN, which is quite a while ago, and the discussions have been going on forever. The IANA stewardship transition was the final step in the process that started with the foundation of ICANN. The intention actually in the beginning was that this transition would take place about a couple of years after ICANN was founded. Clearly it took about, 18 years? And that only shows you how sometimes the good intentions are actually, when confronted with reality, may take much longer than people expect. And this is not only valid, obviously, for ICANN, it's valid for other processes and organizations. But the transition was initiated in 2014 by both the ICANN and the US government, and I'm cutting the long story very short because of constraints of time, but the idea was that ICANN is already a mature organization, and if it can prove through a huge process involving all the stakeholders that it can build on the requirements by the US government and then follow through and finish with the change of bylaws, etc., that it can continue operating as it used to be, except the necessity of having a contract with the US government. So the US government allowed the contract upon which ICANN was working to expire on October 1st last year. And we see now, more than a year later, the internet is still functioning and the domain names are being coordinated in the same way as they used to be, as well as the IP addresses and the protocol parameters. So clearly the transition worked based on what we see happening after that. There is a huge work that is actually taking place since then. And Greg here is one of the people who may actually, I don't know if you guys would agree, but he may probably take the mic and say a few words about the workstream processes that have been taking place ever since the transition was fulfilled. Would be awesome. You can just, yeah.
Yeah, just come around the front.
just say a few words who you are for the people online.
Hi, I'm Greg Shatton. I'm the president of the Intellectual Property Constituency in the ICANN GNSO. I was also a member of the working group, cross-community working group on the IANA transition, and a participant in the working group on enhancing ICANN's accountability, where I am the rapporteur for the subgroup discussing issues surrounding ICANN's jurisdiction. So the reason that the accountability work even exists is because when the IANA transition was proposed, people questioned whether ICANN was really completely ready to be accountable for its own actions without the oversight of the US government. So in ICANN fashion, a working group was formed to improve ICANN's accountability. The first phase took place before the IANA transition, and Workstream 1 solved a number of problems, made a number of changes to the ICANN bylaws so that the community could hold ICANN, and particularly the ICANN board, accountable in ways that weren't available before. A number of issues were left for after the transition. 9 particular subjects, such as staff accountability, supporting organization and advisory committee accountability, ICANN's jurisdiction, improving the ombudsman, diversity, transparency, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple, but it's all available online, of course. The group has been working fairly feverishly toward a deadline that really occurred just before the Abu Dhabi meeting. In order to get the work done before the end of fiscal 2018, all of the subgroups had to finish their work before Abu Dhabi and put the work out for public comment after Abu Dhabi. There was a face-to-face meeting on day 0 of the Abu Dhabi meeting, and at which a number of things, particularly the jurisdiction question, which has been quite thorny, were discussed. Right now there are about 5 public comment periods on different subgroups' work that are available on the ICANN public comment page, where you can go and read the work of the group and make your comments on whether we got it right or not. And all those comments are read and understood by the subgroup and duly taken into account, which may or may not mean that changes are made, but they are duly taken into account. And the issue of jurisdiction was also the subject of a high interest topic, which I'm sure you'll get to at the, or cross-community topic, which we'll get to on this panel. ICANN is an unusual organization in that it is stateless in a sense, and yet it is a California corporation and thus subject to various US laws, which creates an interesting balancing act for ICANN.
Thanks a lot. Can you, before you put the next slide, I just want to ask the audience here, and maybe those online can also answer. Do you have any slight idea how many were the total mailing list exchanges in this process? This is 2 years effort, hundreds of people. Any idea? Because it's on the next slide.
I would say it's probably around 30,000.
Good guess. You may have seen the slide.
No, I know what my inbox looks like.
10% difference. So these are the numbers from these 2 years effort, and it is showing actually not only how engaged the broader ICANN community is, but also how difficult it is for the ICANN organization to coordinate all these efforts, because at the end of the day, we, the staff, have to support the community in their efforts to achieve the results that, you know, will lead to the transition. So it was a really an unprecedented multi-stakeholder effort, and in many ways, the result of this effort have been also, and here I can use my UN hat, so to speak, have been used at the United Nations and other UN agencies to show what this multi-stakeholder model means, because a lot of people talk about it. And to use a minute of your time, but multi-stakeholder model within the ICANN context means that everyone can participate in the work of ICANN and in the discussing the processes of developing policies, and everyone is on equal footing. So governments, private sector, civil society, individuals, end users if they are using domain name services or IP addresses, but practically anyone. We always keep on saying ICANN is the only organization that goes around the world 3 times a year to have its public meetings. And we do that so that we can go to areas and geographic regions and countries that may not necessarily be engaged with ICANN if we only meet in the best locations for such meetings, which will be the major hubs, you know, airport hubs, etc. So recently, as we were saying, the last meeting was in Abu Dhabi a couple of weeks ago. The next meeting will be in Puerto Rico in March, and then in Panama in June. And we keep on changing geographic areas, and because we want to reach out to as many people as possible, but also because in some of those countries where we go, local people, you know, show up to an ICANN meeting, and then some of them get engaged more and more with ICANN, and that's the beauty of the model, because you not only need to have different constituencies represented, but also you want to have possibly people who are from different, not the usual ICANNers, so to speak, not the old school people who have been since the beginning, but just new people. We have a program called the Next Gen, like we next generation of people to deal with ICANN. We have ICANN fellowships, etc. So this is one of the ways to see how we are working. And indeed, the multi-stakeholder model may be slow in some cases, as we were talking about. The WHOIS service is still not yet decided, but at the same time, it allows everyone to say what they want, and it allows everyone to defend or protect their positions.
I think it's also worth mentioning that it is bottom-up and consensus-driven. Consensus does not mean full consensus. There are minority opinions, but it does mean rough consensus. It means that, generally speaking, there is no voting. You really need to use the power of persuasion. And bottom-up is important. It's not run by the facilitators or rapporteurs or co-chairs or presidents or kings or anyone else. It is run from the bottom. And if you can't get a consensus out of the bottom, nothing happens. So everyone needs to move from their safe positions into something a little more oriented toward collaboration.
Yeah, thank you. Joe?
Great. Thank you, Greg, for going over the accountability work in depth. That was really great. And there's more information on the slide. When we share the slides with you, you can click through and see more about that. Right now we're going to go back to Vinny. We talked a little bit about the Governmental Advisory Committee and some of the things they were working on, but there is, I'm sure, more Vinny has to tell.
You mean on the GAC, right?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, okay, yes, updates from the GAC. So the GAC, on every ICANN meeting, the GAC has its own meetings where a number of issues are being discussed. They always publish a GAC communique. I highly recommend to read it. I've put down some of the key issues. I think, Joe, you mentioned already the GAC elected a new chair, Manal Ismail from Egypt. She's been, by the way, around ICANN since the beginning, and she's been doing internet policy back in Egypt. So it's an excellent choice for the GAC to have somebody with in-depth knowledge, and not only about ICANN, but also about the internet in general. They also elected vice chairs from China, France, Peru, Senegal, and NUI, which is also a way to show how GAC is evolving. Now there are 175 members of the government. GAC, is the Governmental Advisory Committee. And more than 30 intergovernmental organizations are observers in the GAC. The GAC also had an update from the GAC Public Safety Working Group, which was discussing the importance of maintaining access for public safety agencies and other users with legitimate purposes to the WHOIS database. The Public Safety Working Group also assess and improve the effectiveness of safeguard against DNS abuse and issues related to the DNS. Also, the working group presented, the GAC working group. There is another working group of the GAC on underserved regions, which is also one of the important parts that ICANN does, which is reaching out to regions that are not well presented at ICANN or that have problems coming to an ICANN meeting. So there will be capacity development workshops coming in Nepal in February, in Puerto Rico in March during the ICANN meeting, in Senegal in April, etc. Also, one of the other issues that were discussed at the GAC and are described in the GAC communique is the application for .Amazon and related things. That's one of the issues that has been discussed for quite a while. The GAC says that they express the need to find a mutually acceptable solution in the case of the .Amazon generic top-level domain application. And last but not least, on the ICANN jurisdiction issue that Greg touched a little bit, the GAC reiterates its support for the open multi-stakeholder process by which the recommendations are being developed. So yet again, you see that the governments that are part of the Governmental Advisory Committee, and these are usually the telecom administrations or foreign ministries in some cases, they also recognize that the multi-stakeholder model has its virtues and could be used to address the issues related to ICANN. It's interesting to note, it's a side note, but it's interesting to note that since in the last year, since October 1st, 2016, more and more governments understand that they actually have to be part of the GAC, more actively participating in the GAC, because whether they participate or not, I can still take some decisions. The GAC is still giving its advice to the board, and it's better to be part of this process if you want to influence it rather than stay on the sidelines and argue that something is happening. So that's with regards to the GAC.
Great, thank you. And now we'll go to Judith for updates from the At-Large Advisory Committee.
Hi, it's Judith again. So if people are not very familiar with At-Large consists of 5 different regional groups. North America, Naralo, African, Afralo, Asia Pacific, along with other parts of East Asia, APRALO, Latin American Caribbean, LACRALO, and European, EURALO. So all those 5 regions come together. And we work on issues and advocate for internet end users. And Naralo has, we have a flyer in the back. And our members work on a variety of initiatives such as policy advice, development, outreach and engagement, training, capacity building, technology and accessibility issues, and we often collaborate with other key internet governance stakeholders. As Vinny was talking about, the At-Large also has a communique now. It's a joint statement with the GAC. This time was our first one, and we're going to be doing it on a more regular basis, and I suggest you check them out. This one was about enabling inclusive, informed, and meaningful participation. And it's talking about the need to have a simple and efficient document management system so that both not insiders and also new people can have quick access to information and key points and statements or summaries of some of these issues. We have liaisons to 4 different groups, 4 different constituencies within ICANN. We have a liaison to the to GNSO. We have a liaison to the CCNSO communities, as well as to the ESAC and to the Government Advisory Committee in the GAC. Some of the issues, we also range, we have some general, besides our participation in the cross-community working groups and in the other cross-community groups, we also have people who work on policy development processes, as well as people who work on various at-large working groups I'm the chair of the Technology Task Force, and we work on issues relating to technology and how we can implement technology. Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just hearing you talk about policy, and I wonder what issues you bring up in these policy discussions.
Okay,
I'm
so,
just wondering. I'm not
Dave,
criticizing.
that's a great question, policy issues. So policy in ICANN is very different from policy elsewhere. Policy in ICANN has relate to issues less as the who is, or universal acceptance, or IDNs, and international domain names. It's not necessarily a policy. What might be interesting to you, Dave, is within many of the different RALOs, we are creating policy hot topics. And there are starting to be working groups on these. In the RALO, under our new chair, Eduardo Diaz, he's created a bunch of subsets of different policy issues based on that policy hot topics that our community has done. We surveyed our members a year and a half ago, asked them what are the main policy issues they're interested in, and within that, we created hot topics. And so we're rolling out, starting a select group of new teams working on these policy issues, and we have a discussion list, and they discuss, and we're all a Skype group, and happy to answer you, address that issue. Otherwise, other regions have also their own policy hot topics. I know URALO does, and AP RALO. But one of the other things that we're trying also to do is, especially in North America, is find a place where we all have these same working groups, and so many of the other constituencies also have the same groups, but none of these groups talk together. And so we're right now in North America starting to creation of the North American space. It was successfully launched several years ago in Latin America, and several of the other regions have followed it. There's a Middle East space, there's a Asia Pacific space, there's other different spaces, and so we're starting it up, and we have agreements from the CCTLDs and parts of GNSO of all drive to want to figure out how we can get to know each other more and working on the same issues so that we're not recreating the wheel each time. I just found out today that the IP constituency also has an outreach and engagement committee. And so none of these groups, and we're trying to the idea is build these linkages within North America and efforts to bolster. Then once we have these leadership, we'll be better able to get a cohesive strategy that will tie together all different constituencies within the region, instead of just having within Navarro, our strategy, and then the NTUC in their area have their strategy. We're going to try to work together and find out what would be the region's interest strategies about this. But some of the other really interesting topics that were discussed with that lodge, with the ICANN board, and was especially the idea of geographic regions and names. So these were the regional internet registries, where 5 of them have different, they're all throughout the world. The one in North America is ARIN. But many of the ARIN several of the ARIN territories also overlap with Latin American Caribbean territories because of anomalies in how these regional internet registries were started. So ARIN has a lot of communities in the English-speaking Caribbean, which are traditionally part of Latin America. And the same thing with other countries. And there was a report done over 5 years ago on geographic names, and it was decided, one of the steps was to have countries who are in these sort of overlapping areas decide which community they want to be into. And it's, for us in Navarro, it's very important when we've been doing our series of last year of outreach and engagement. We have several communities in the Pacific Islands, Guam, North Mariana territories, which are never going to be Navarro territories. We would like to give them to the Pacific communities, and Pacific would like to accept them, but until we get a finalization of this work that ICANN has been doing on geographic names, we can't have this issue done. And so it was brought in front of the board. The board had many other issues, especially with the transition over the last few years, that they pushed it aside. But now they promised that they're going to get to it and work on this. And that's also another interesting issue, is because we want to figure out what's going to be the process. How can countries, if they choose, be aligned with the region of their choice, that within the boundaries, so that maybe some of the English-speaking communities want to be aligned with other parts of the area. A lot of, in At Large, we're trying to make closer tie-ins with our regional internet registries, since they work on a lot of the issues that are core to ICANN. But we will often have difficulties when they're spread out in different regions. So that's one of our efforts in doing that. We also talked about, as Rennie mentioned, the GDPR, which is focused on every region, is focusing on that. And ALAC has several of these concerns related to that, as well as one of the big topics in At Large was the At Large review. There was an independent review done last year of At Large, which brought out several issues, but many other people in At Large are feeling that the reviewers, although independent, didn't have enough experience and knowledge to really understand what are the issues in At Large. And so there's a lot of work in trying to now figuring out which recommendations are valid, which can be modified, which can be implemented, how can we change the structure, how can we move ahead, what is the step going forward. So we've been working on, we had written detailed responses to that, and that's going to be, and that's also in front of the board, and that's on one of the issues they're discussing as well. So we have several other different issues. If you want to get involved in any of the working groups, please let me know. If you wanted the hot topics, that'll be great too. We hopefully will see several of you guys in IGF in December, where many At Large and Navarro members have on panels and in Geneva. So I look forward to engaging with you then. One more thing. At Puerto Rico, we will be having a North American School of Internet Governance. This will be happening 3 days before the Puerto Rico conference, and we've been working on planning on that and schedule. If you want some more information, also happy to talk to you about that. But that is another thing. And as well as, along with, they were talking about the fellowships and the Next Gen, we have the Global Indigenous Ambassador Program, where we nominate 2 people from indigenous communities throughout the world to be ambassadors, sort of like fellows, to the ICANN meeting, and get a better understanding of this and how they can take back this knowledge into their indigenous communities. So last, in Abu Dhabi, our fellows, we had 1 fellow from North America and 1 fellow from Latin America, who added greatly to the knowledge, and they spoke at the public forum. And this year, in Puerto Rico, we hope to we're going to have 2 more fellows, and who they will be, we'll have decided shortly. And Next Gen applications are still open. I think December 18th is a deadline for Next Gen. And they're mostly university students in Canada and in US and Puerto Rico.
Great, yeah. Thank you, Judith, for the at-large update and the fellowship Next Gen promotion. It's a great segue into, as we kind of wrap up here. We did mention about getting involved, and we do want people to get involved. We do have, as I said, the fellowship program and the Next Gen program, which are, and then a newcomer program, which aim to get people more involved in ICANN, connect them with the community, and get them to ICANN meetings. So the first two, the fellowship program and the next gen program. The fellowship program is focused on capacity building and immersion in the ICANN community. It brings approximately 60 fellows to each meeting. The next gen program, if we do have any students in the audience or online, I'd ask to pay particular attention to that. It's for folks between the ages of 18 and 30 enrolled in higher learning within the region that the ICANN meeting is taking place. So for the next meeting, which is in Puerto Rico, which is the North America region at ICANN, folks that are, as I said, enrolled in higher learning can apply for the next gen program and come to that meeting. There's sort of here are the kind of unique qualities and the subtle differences between the three programs. I'll just take a look at the newcomer program is a self-taught program. It's we have a large repository of online courses at ICANN Learn. It's at learn.icann.org is the address. There's several courses on internet governance, ICANN, and the various bodies at ICANN that we talked about today. And it's the newcomer program. It's a way to develop skills and knowledge so that you're ready to apply to a fellowship or next gen program and get engaged in an ICANN meeting. In terms of funding, there is no funding offered for the newcomer program, but for the fellowship and the next gen program, travel accommodations and a stipend are associated with that, so that gets you to the meeting. And there's no registration fee for the ICANN meeting. I should point that out. It's just getting there and stay. Judith, you had something to say?
Yes, and the Global Indigenous Ambassador Program is also fully funded. We had funding for two ambassadors, includes travel slots, per diem, and flight and hotels. And we are hoping to have the program continue. It was a program to get people. Prior to this year, the fellowship had been not open to people from developed countries. So people from the US, Europe, or Australia, or any other countries, even though there were indigenous populations, even though it was very low income populations, they were not eligible until just recently. And one of the reasons why they were opened up is there was a lot of complaints by, comments by people at large, specifically talking to them. I'm saying is that there are so many of these people who could be eligible, who are not eligible just because they happen to live in these countries, and which is not really a fair assessment. And the Indigenous program was started up through a process known as the special budget process, which is a process that allows communities to come up with ideas on what kind of funding or programs they want to do. And if it passes their community, if it passes the board, then these things can get funded to how they were submitted as the project. And that is how our special budget, that is how our Global Indigenous Ambassadors were funded this past year. And hopefully we will be able to continue the program the next year through the same process.
Excellent, thank you. We've mentioned it several times. The 61st ICANN meeting will be in San Juan, Puerto Rico. We'd love to have you join us in person at the meeting, but if you can't, there's plenty of ways to be involved online. ICANN offers several remote participation options. Here's a link with more information, so when we send the slides out, you'll be able to get into the meeting, and the schedule will be put up at a later date, and you'll be able to see the sessions that you can listen in on and view via, we do an Adobe Connect video and chat and all that. So, and then here's a link for our mailing list and newsletters. We sign up for that. And with that, I think we have a couple minutes for questions. Thank you for your attention.
Can I ask that you drop the slides so we can bring up Chris on the screen? So stop sharing slides.
I will stop sharing the slides.
There he is.
And there is Chris.
He doesn't know he's
He doesn't know he's online.
Chris, you're
See ya.
on. Say hello.
Hi. Oh, do I have a question?
I'd like, well, just do you have any comments, Chris, on what's been said so far?
No, I'm just very delighted that you're all doing this. I think Joe probably mentioned at the beginning that really we recognize that people hear about ICANN meetings, but ICANN meetings aren't necessarily necessary to become involved in ICANN. And so what we're trying to do is provide an opportunity for people like you to ask questions to people like us that can try to, in a smaller group, use real world language and hopefully some interesting examples to talk about the work of ICANN and encourage you to follow some of the topics. So just a word of thanks, and thanks for Veni, who's fresh off the plane from India and no doubt feeling the jet lag at this stage. And for Greg and Judith and other community members like ISOC New York members that were there, and for Joe for delivering it, and to Hugo, thanks.
Well, I have to tell you, Chris, Hugo actually came one day later than me from India, so this has been his first night last night in New York. So he's
good luck to you.
He's sleeping on the first row. He just woke up. But this is, by the way, this is one of the things where people constantly think that, you know, ICANN is going around the world. You guys have these great places that you go and have your meetings. They just forget that that also means severe jet lag and constraints on people who actually go and participate in these meetings. And it's not only about the staff, it's also about the community that travels. So Puerto Rico is more or less the same time zone as the US, so I strongly encourage people to consider, if they don't want to travel, or if they, you know, have their daily jobs, because an ICANN meeting is easily now taking place, 8-9 days. With the travel, it may become even 9-10 days. So you may consider participating remotely. Joining a mailing list actually might be the easiest thing, because it's real-time work that takes place, and you can read your emails whenever you want and engage in conversation. And I'm following some of the mailing lists, including the one that Greg is very active on. And I'm fascinated by the fact that because the community is around the world, so there is constant communication going on 24/7. Consider just the fact that in some parts of the world, Friday is a day off, but Sunday is a working day. That means you get emails on Sundays by the people who have been resting on Friday, and then they read the follow-up, you know, emails and respond. It's an effort that takes a lot of time, and most of the people that use the internet are not even aware probably that ICANN exists. And that, in a way, is the beauty of this model, because as long as nobody knows what we do, that means we are doing a good job. And as long as the people who are interested, and that's one of the ways we are outreaching to new communities, we are trying to bring new people, because at the end of the day, we just witnessed one of the pioneers of the internet stepping down from the ICANN chair of the board, Steve Crocker. So with him stepping down, he's the last one from those internet pioneers who's been around ICANN since its foundation. And we are entering into a new time, if you will, where the next generation is taking over, but we also need to get the following generation as well, you know, the younger people. And this is very difficult when you're 25 years old, and some of the people in the audience are probably even younger. It's difficult to figure out, so what am I gonna do? Do I want to engage with this group, and then in 10 years or 12 years, or 20 years, I will be one of those people speaking on the stage, you know, and presenting what's been happening, and maybe Greg will be still around to say what's happening in the workstream 22 or whatever it's gonna be back then, you know, in 20 years, and will be considered a pioneer, you know. And the thing is that it requires a lot of commitment of time mainly, but also if you have the knowledge and if you think it's an interesting topic to learn how to coordinate those technical identifiers, unique identifiers, you may want to join and just take a look. And especially, I would say that if you combine skills which are not necessarily only engineering, but also legal and economy and political science and stuff like that, it's becoming more and more needed because of the conversation that's going on around the world in the different constituencies. We need people from different skills and different backgrounds.
Okay, I'll just say as far as questions go, you don't need a mic. I've got a sort of little room mic at the back of the room. I'll just crank it up while you ask questions.
Let anybody else go before me. I had a question already. Okay. I'm going to take a couple of questions offline that I came here for so we can talk about the one that's really important. As we know, ICANN represents about half the world. If you look at the ICANN board, a third of the internet or half the internet is not represented there. That was because the United States blocked China. That doesn't happen to be true now.
I'm sorry, I'm lost here. What do you mean by that?
By the United States blocked
No,
China?
by ICANN is not represented.
I looked at the board, and of the board, 70% were from a quarter of the internet, that's North America and Europe, and most of the remaining 6 have close personal ties to those. The reason I'm bringing that up, I mean, it's obvious. We don't have any Chinese that are a third of the internet.
There have been Chinese, for the record.
One Taiwanese.
No, I was on the board with Professor Chin from China, CNNIC, so, you know, for the record, the bylaw says that there should be, the 5 geographic regions should be represented at all times, and no region should have more than 5 members at the same time.
Yeah, but
so this is the bylaw.
The EU vote identically at international events, like WICIT and the Plenty Pod and so on. So that's one group that dominates ICANN. We all know this. And the question I want to put out on the table, especially given that something much more important than ICANN is happening next week in Busan, where China is doing the World Internet Conference. And a month and a half ago, the BRICS came together in order to set up their alternative institutions because they feel they're not represented in ICANN. And we all know the North-South divide at the ITU and almost everywhere else. How can we build bridges so that we don't split the internet by excluding half of the people of the internet from the board and from the top management of ICANN?
Well, unless Chris wants to answer that question as a global business engagement guy,
Yes.
I could say a few words, but Chris, do you want to say something? We can't hear you though. You may be muted. Anyway, I saw the nodding, which means no. And at least in this part of the world, because in my part of the world, this is yes, actually, when you say it like this. So there is, first of all, I don't see it as a problem. I tend to disagree with you because the history is that, yes, the internet, you know, we all know the history, why the internet was created in the US and why the US companies are still quite a big portion of the domain name industry. At the same time, if you look at the new GTODs or the internationalized domain names, there is no American IDN anyway, because they don't need it in the US to have a domain name in a script different than the Latin. But the board composition is built by all the supporting and organizations and advisory councils, and the nominating committee is also selecting board members. So the only way to have board members from different parts of the world is if different candidates from these parts of the world are candidates. So hold on. You know, I need to answer your question. I mean, you can keep on interrupting, but I'm not going to answer the question. So if you if somebody says a region, particular, or a country is not represented, maybe they should address this country's internet community and ask them to apply, because if they don't apply, nobody's going to select them. At the same time, I mean, you can argue, yes, but the board has like 4 or 5 Americans right now out of 21 people, but at the same time, the CEO is not American, the chair of the board is not American, the chair of the GAC is not American. So the key positions in ICANN are actually non-American, A. And B, even if they were American, are you going to argue that it's like Steve Crocker was chair of the board until a few weeks ago? Do you think that he was not good chair, or do you think that he shouldn't have been a chair just because he happens to be born in the US and to be one of the founding fathers of the internet? I would disagree with that, because you elect people and you select and you choose people based on the merits, not on this like their citizenship. Anyway, encourage people. I mean, you're a journalist, you can write stuff and encourage people to apply. I have to tell you though, because I happen to be the only East European who's been on the board since the foundation of ICANN. It's very tough to be on the ICANN board currently, and it was even tough back then. I stepped down 11 years ago, and I calculated at the end of this that I have spent half of my time on work related to ICANN, half working day. And we even had a public interaction with Vint Cerf, who was arguing that this is not half time, it's 25% of the time. And I said it's somewhere in the minutes, in the scripts, that his working day was 16 hours, so therefore his 25% is equal to my 50% of my 8-hour working day. So if you are today at the ICANN board where the work is even huge, just imagine in the last 2 years, 3 years when the transition was taking place, the thousands of pages that you have to read every day. And if your native language is not English, which was my case, I clearly would read slower than in Bulgarian. And therefore, I would spend more time to try to make up, for all the works. So it's a very challenging task. And it's not easy to find the people who can allocate the time, or to find the people whose job will allow them to allocate the time, which I just mentioned. The 3 public ICANN meetings is 10 days each for the board members. So that means you have to have a job which will allow you 30-day a year travel, plus another workshops and some participants in other meetings. So which is this job that will allow 6 to 8 weeks of vacation time, paid or not paid, it doesn't matter. I mean, there are not that many jobs like that. So I think it's one of the challenges is really that serving on the board it's a full-time job, or nearly full-time job, and it requires commitment that may not be necessarily possible from certain members of the community.
Dave, is Judith, I also want to answer, is that the board, we've asked that question, especially in Navallo and at large, because we noticed that a lot of the board, and even in the nominating committee, whose job is also to recruit people, is that there's not enough female participation, female choices in the NomCom. And we were always told is that the sense is that we would love to have more, but the people are not applying. And that's even more true with the board people. The board people, they're paid, but they're paid as if it was 25% of their day, when it's really 3/4 of their time. So they're not, although they are paid, they're not paid for a full-time job that they have to do. And especially if you're getting involved in ICANN, most of the work is volunteer, and it's very hard to get people who are passionate about it, who can devote so many hours to this. And so that's another issue. But in regard to representation in at large, the Asia Pacific Regional at Large Group, AP RALO, has been doing significant work. They're one of the largest RALOs, and they're extremely diverse, running from Pacific Islands up to Armenia. So they cover very wide. They cover the Gulf states, they cover any of those stands. All those states are several of them are with AP RALO. And so they are extremely diverse, but yet they've been working to increase the number of ALSs. They have several, maybe more, maybe 5 or at least in China. So they're working out and trying to go into these communities. Not all the constituencies are like that. At large, because we're based on regions, is more diverse. But even so, we have an effort to try to get more gender equality and more diverse representation. And we work on this. It's always an effort in progress. And especially now, like in the turnover now in Navarro, both leaderships are male. But it's hard. You have to get other candidates to apply, and in NomCom, you have to get them to get interested in them. And maybe it's a different process to get others interested. Maybe you need to work on a different way or create another process to get more interested parties to come and submit their nominations.
So I'm just conscious of time. We're past the bottom of the hour, so I don't know if we have other questions or, when. Go ahead, Jolly.
I've got one issue, which is that when you have these meetings and you've got like 15 tracks and one's trying to follow everything at the same time, what I find really useful is the scribing. And the scribing is only within the Adobe Connects. And previously, when you had caption first, I was able to deduce, what the different URLs were within stream text, so that I could have like 10 tabs open on my browser, which were all scrolling text, and I could keep going from flipping from one to the other, following the text and seeing what was being said. And so my request is straight for this, is that when you go into a meeting, you publish all of those stream text URLs separate to the Adobe Connect, so one doesn't have to go into the Adobe Connect rooms to find and dig for those text links.
We should Judith, Joe. We can probably ask the IT folks who are running the meetings to see whether that's possible.
Right. Okay.
I mean, a URL published somewhere should.
Right. And Jolly, they have a survey out now on the ICANN meeting, and that will be an excellent part to put in the survey, because I know Chris Gift and his team are looking at those, and they want those feedback, and those are the type of things that they can easily do.
Yeah. Dave?
Very quickly, can I ask the board member we have, or the ICANN representatives here, to make a statement that, unlike in the past, per the previous CEO, China is now more than welcome to send people, and would encourage the Chinese to send people to the board and important events and the important instances.
I wouldn't limit that. Why are you limiting it to only one country? First of all, I don't think.
It's a third of the internet, and it was specifically excluded by the United States per the prior CEO.
Please, that's.
Maybe we.
I'm not aware of that. I've
Yeah.
been involved in ICANN heavily for the last 10 years.
That's yeah.
I'm not aware of
Maybe.
it. Videotape, and I printed it, and it's gone through the ICANN. He was very explicit on it. I can send you the quote.
I mean, given the fact how many times Fadi has been in China and engaging with the Chinese on every level, and the fact that we have a Beijing engagement center, and it has actually started way before Fadi, and during Fadi's terms it has been increased. I cannot take this that easily, but I think your point about calling to people. Yes, we constantly, there is the NomCom has sessions at every ICANN meeting, they're reaching out, sometimes they publish, I think actually not sometimes, but always they publish even the calls for applications in major media outlets so that people who not necessarily follow ICANN can take a look. But again, look, this is not about like a competition between different countries. It's to be on the board is somebody needs to be interested in being on the board. You can't just say, oh, we definitely need a country. And that's why actually it's regional, it's not country-based. Because if it's country-based, then you're limiting yourself. How are you going to choose 21 people among 193 countries? And what are you going to do with the others who are not represented? I think there is a lot of engagement with every country. I've also seen, by the way, countries at different levels arguing about the fact that in countries actually that were arguing that ICANN should be independent are now arguing that it's actually not as easy as they thought, because now they have to go to California and work with ICANN directly. If before that they could try to reach out to the US government. So there is a lot of things that are changing. My appeal would be not necessarily from the staff or from the board, as you were asking, but from the community, because the community is the one that actually defines what ICANN does. It's not the staff, it's not the board. It's a completely different ICANN today than it used to be just a year and a month ago. So you guys should, the community, and everyone who is watching, should be more active. And it's not coincidence that it's called the empowered community. This is the new term, which is in the new bylaws. So you have more power than anybody on the ICANN staff or on the ICANN, any individual on the ICANN board. You have to be more active into reaching out to countries, and you're a journalist, so you can write something that can be picked up by a Chinese outlet and published. But there, I don't know, I'm not on the NOMCOM. I don't know if anybody here has been on the NOMCOM. But they do publish statistics, and they say how many people applied, and I think they also mention regions, if not countries. So this is an area where things need to be improved, and I haven't. I actually, having worked, having spent time with UN diplomats from the Chinese mission to the UN, I haven't heard anyone complaining about. In fact, on the contrary, I've heard the Chinese permanent representative praising the IANA transition, for example, on the floor of the WSIS plus 10 negotiations 2 years ago. So there is a lot of understanding there what ICANN does, and a lot of engagement. That's in a nutshell.
That's probably a good place to wrap up, I think. You could keep having the conversation going afterward. We have refreshments in the back. But Hugo, I don't know if you want to say anything. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming and giving us your time and attention. Thanks once again to the ISOC-NY Chapter and Columbia University for this. And we'll see you after the ICANN 61 meeting.